Welcome, and thank you for joining Between Sessions with Justin and Challie.
Just a quick disclaimer before we start. This podcast is for educational and conversational purposes only. It's not intended to replace therapy, counseling, or professional mental health care. We are sharing lived experiences and reflections, not prescriptions, and we encourage our listeners to seek professional guidance when needed.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you guys for joining this week.
Today we have a really fun topic. We are going to be talking about gaslighting.
Ooh, I know that's been kind of a buzzword, and I think there's a lot of different definitions around this, but where did gaslighting even come from?
So this is actually really interesting. There is an old play. It came out in like 1938 called Gaslight. And it was actually later made into a film around like 1944. You might be able to find it. But essentially it was a play/movie about a married couple, and the husband was very manipulative towards the wife. And the one thing that he did that stood out was he very slowly and subtly lowered the gas lights in the house. So like very subtly lowered them. And then when she noticed and she said something, he like said she was crazy and it was all in her head. And the name of the play was Gaslight. And so that is where the term gaslighting originated from, because he was lowering the gas lights and then telling her that it was all in her head.
Okay.
It has gotten very popular in the last few years. Actually, in 2022, it was the Merriam-Webster's dictionary. It was the word of the year.
Oh, so they caught some traction.
Because the definition of gaslighting was looked up, and they had an increase of, I think it was like 1,700% of people researching gaslighting.
Right.
So it was the word of the year. Yeah.
Wow.
And we hear it all the time now. But like, what is it?
Social media, it's so commonly thrown out, sometimes I can kind of lose the actual depth of what it is. Yeah, like
For
let's go
sure.
over what it truly is. It's not just the random lies or the white lies. Let's dig a little bit deeper. What is it?
Well, to me, when I hear the definition of gaslighting, it is a form of manipulation where you, like the play, the person, the perpetrator, will make the victim feel, for lack of better words, like they're going crazy. They will manipulate a situation. They will tell the person that they're not remembering it correctly. And it is a pattern that happens over time. So this is not like you and I both went to something and I remember it one way and you remember it another way. So clearly we're gaslighting each other.
Right.
This is more so, it's usually like a calculated manipulation, and it happens over time. And it starts slow and builds over time.
And with it starting slow, it might be one or two things, and then sprinkled in is going to be some praise and some things to kind of boost you back up. It's not all or nothing. And that's where it can be so tricky to identify this.
Yes.
So within this, all manipulation is not gaslighting, but gaslighting has manipulation in it and is a form of manipulation. Something that is a little bit tricky is that it is not always intentional, but it is with the intent to gain control or power over someone. So what I mean by that is that someone may not exactly know what type of manipulation they're using, and they may not identify it as gaslighting, but it is with the intent, knowingly or unknowingly, to gain control. Sometimes this can be a learned behavior. So many times it can stem from parents or caregivers and questioning and minimizing trust. And so we learn not to trust ourselves. So it can be a learned behavior in that sense. It can be something developed in adulthood as a way to gain control, to get needs met, but it is systematic, it is done over time, and there's a pattern to it. Whether it be the intention is there or not, it is with intention to gain control, and it is a process that happens over time, and it can be really difficult to spot.
Yes. I know for me, like when I see it, it's like hindsight is 2020. So in the moment, it's very hard to recognize that it's happening. Once you're out of that situation and you look back, you're like, my goodness, I can't believe I fell for that.
And you develop a distrust within ourselves. We start to question our own interpretation of things, and that can be really difficult to stand our ground in something. Many times, if we're experiencing this, our environment is already a bit chaotic anyways, and it can be in these subtle ways that we're just, maybe I didn't remember that correctly. And then it builds, and then it builds, and we lose our self-esteem, we lose our trust ourselves, that confidence diminishes. It starts out really, really small, like you said, but then it grows to the point that we're probably completely blind to it.
And the other important piece is gaslighting usually occurs with someone that you should be able to trust. So a romantic partner, parent, there's different types of gaslighting, but it always occurs with someone that you should be able to trust. Like if my husband told me that I was, mistaken about something that had happened, I trust him that, he saw it from a different point of view, and I know that
Mhm.
he is, has good intentions.
So getting into this, many time, I guess I'm gonna go on the piece of like the relationship piece, and I know there's different pieces of gaslighting, and we'll kind of go over each one. Looking at a relationship, it does not always go this way, but commonly it will be you meet someone and they give you a lot of information really, really quickly to build that trust. Can be like love bombing is a
Love
really big
bombing.
topic that comes into this, or a term. So they want to build trust really, really quickly, bring you right in, pull on your emotions, and then they're going to very subtly start to either question you on things or tell you that you're not right or you're remembering something. And there's different language that comes into this, and I think that's something we'll cover as well. But it starts out early in that relationship, so we don't notice it as a red flag, and then it grows, and then it's still accompanied by that love bombing, and there's praise within it. And then, especially if we start to catch on, the person might back off a little bit, and then they're going to agree with us or make us believe that we're right. So it pulls us back into that trust because
Mhm.
ultimately they want control. They don't want to break that trust completely because then if you leave, their goal is not accomplished anymore. Any other ways that you can think of that it like starts within like the romantic or intimate relationships?
I mean, I can think of examples like off the top of my head. If you go out with a partner and they are acting inappropriate, like you go to a bar and they're just like they're acting inappropriate, they're flirting with other people while you're on a date and just stuff like that. And then you bring it up to them after, like, hey, this really made me uncomfortable. If they said things like, okay, you need to stop being so paranoid. I was not flirting with anyone. I am a friendly person. If you are upset about it and they say, like, you really need to just calm down. That's
Mhm.
not what happened. Maybe you had a little too much to drink and you're remembering it wrong. And they'll make excuses so that way you're like, okay, well, I did have a glass of wine. Maybe I did remember it wrong. And you're kind of like it's like an internal battle of like,
Yeah.
okay, did I interpret it wrong? Was it not flirtation? Maybe I don't know what flirtation is. And you really start to question your beliefs.
Something that also comes into that in that beginning part of the relationship when they're divulging all of this information that tends to be really personal, whether it be true or not true, you tend to become more vulnerable and then you share things that were triggers or past experiences. And then that can be utilized against you as well, whether it be you share things that happened in past relationships, or if you're vulnerable about something that maybe we did wrong, like, oh, I overreacted about this, they might utilize that to then remember you said that you do this all the time. A big
Yeah.
thing is going to be those all or nothing statements, always, never, the common, very black or white statements, and there's not much middle ground because if there's middle ground or gray area, then you have a leg to stand on to challenge something. When they say always or never, then it's easier to shut down.
Yep.
What are some of the other areas that this might show up? So romantic and intimate relationships is definitely one
I
area.
think like that's the most well known when people think of gaslighting. They think of their like not their significant other, I hope, but they think of like a significant other. One thing that I see a lot is parental gaslighting. And I think I don't want to categorize it too much, but I think our generation sees this a lot is we will remember something from our childhood and,
Mm.
parents will say like it wasn't that bad. Like your childhood was fine. You Did not have a traumatic childhood, you went to Disney. But a lot of the same language. It's like, you're not remembering that correctly. That's not what dad said. He was just mad. It was just heat of the moment. He didn't mean that. Yeah, it's actually a lot of the same language now that I think of it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it can be so common. And I think when we're talking about it with parents is it can be really difficult to have that vulnerability because it's our first time living and we might make mistakes. A way that it shows up is we get buried in that defense and
Mhm.
denial that maybe something wasn't great. And that's okay.
Right.
But it's many times cushioned with like this what should be supportive language and almost weaponized in a sense of, oh, your memory is off or you were too young. You don't remember that right. It was probably a dream
Yes. Yep.
are really common ones.
Yes, like if you remember a traumatic situation, like you got, screamed at by a parent or assaulted by a parent, and you bring it up and they say, like, that never happened. That sounds like a bad dream. Are you sure you didn't just dream that? I mean, you used to have nightmares when you were a kid. Maybe that was just part of a nightmare that you're remembering. Yep.
And that really develops that core distrust. Because if we know when we felt something in our body and then we're told that it's wrong by someone we are supposed to trust, it makes us question it. That makes us so much more susceptible to be in a relationship like that when we're older. Don't listen to our bodies. We don't listen to ourselves as much. And we can really end up in some dangerous situations.
That is such a good point, is if you grow up and that's all you know, and you don't learn to trust those instincts, you are much more likely to end up in a toxic relationship where you are being manipulated.
So it does some long lasting damage or has some long lasting effects. And it can be even more challenging when we're trying to confront that and even gain clarity on something because, well, we might really want to feel like we need some closure on something. And we get to a vulnerable point to bring that up. And then we get shut down again. That can really drive it home for us. So that's
Mhm.
where being able to really trust in ourselves and know what we had experienced and try and fight through some of that confusion. Because that tends to be where it is there's a level of confusion or lack of control.
Mm.
We've been gaslit and we just want straight answers to something and we might not get that. And that's so uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's very frustrating, especially as you grow and you're an adult and you have broken those toxic cycles and you
Mhm.
are doing a lot of self work and reflecting, and you see, like, wow, maybe I didn't hear them wrong, or maybe I'm not remembering that wrong, or maybe it wasn't a dream. It really messes with you because it's like, wow, I trusted person. If dad was the perpetrator and mom constantly was like, you just heard him wrong, like, because that is when you are gaslit, you end up covering for the person that is gaslighting. So then it trickles down. So if you're in a relationship and you're being gaslit and then children are involved, it is so common that the one parent will be the gaslighter and the other one will be the one that makes all the excuses. And it's so damaging as an adult once you've done the work and you look back and you're like, wow, I spent my entire childhood thinking that this one parent was like so honest and I could trust them and I could go to them. And that whole time, I was being lied to. And I was being told that my feelings and my memories were invalid. And so it traumatizes you as a kid. It re traumatizes you as an adult looking back on it.
And it takes significant work and it's not a simple process of even getting to a point of being vulnerable to address that
Mm.
either. So it's something that can take some time to be able to even identify when thinking about it specifically with the parent piece of it is it tends to overflow even into those other relationships with peers or adults that should be trusted. If we do gain some distrust when we're young, it will show up and make us less trusting to other people because if we can't trust that person, that parental figure that we should be able to trust, well, who can we trust now?
Right. It does. It makes trusting somebody very hard. And like I said, you can get through it. Like if you were a kid and you grew up in that environment, you can, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of self-reflection and to be okay with that and to move on without that closure. Like you have to be okay not having that closure. You're not going to get it. You're not going to get the apology. You deserve it. You 100% do. But you're not going to get it because no one who is gaslighting or being gaslit, like that power couple, they're not going to admit what they did was wrong. They never will. They will build a huge wall around themselves and they will exclude everyone from their lives before they admit they did something wrong. And it will always be like everyone else is the problem. They are up on this pedestal and you're not going to knock them off.
And when we create those boundaries, that pedestal that they're on becomes really lonely because the more and more that we set those boundaries, the more and more that we trust in ourselves, the more we're going to see the truth and we're going to learn that truth for ourselves. And then we're able to take that bigger look and see what had gone on. So kind of we've talked about like hindsight is 2020. You're able
Mhm.
to look back and see, okay, this adds up now. And that's where that validation is going to come from is being able to remember more and more of those experiences. And sometimes they're repressed memories. Maybe it
Mhm.
has to do with trauma, but that's where we'll get that validation from. But very rarely, if ever, are we going to get that validation or that apology to really make us feel secure in it. We have to build our own sense of security.
Yeah. Yep.
So, where's another area that we might be able to see gaslighting?
I've heard the term medical gaslighting.
Ooh.
But I want to preface this by saying I don't know that that is always the right terminology because, as we said, it has to be a pattern and it has to be, for the most part, intentional.
Mhm.
But a lot of people will say, like, they're being medically gaslit. And I'm not invalidating their feelings. I just don't know if that's the right terminology.
Right.
But it is one that I hear all the time. So we could talk about that for a minute.
So, I guess kind of what I gather from that would be maybe not feeling heard or not feeling like validated in what we're bringing up.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the reference you've heard it in?
Yes,
Okay.
and I've heard it a lot from women, and I mean, we made jokes when I was pregnant about how, I could go to the doctor and my arm would fall off and they would be like, totally normal, you're fine, pop it back on." But there are doctors out there where, especially I don't know why I keep coming back to pregnancy, but it's like, especially if you're pregnant, like everything is just kinda like, "You're fine, that's normal." And I feel like you can tell me if I am incorrect, but I feel like women get this a lot more, where our pains are not taken as seriously by certain medical professionals. I mean, like, I'm lucky enough, all my doctors are great. I've never felt that in my, like, adult life. But I have heard that women will go with, some symptoms and doctors will just chalk it up to like, are you just anxious? Are you just stressed? And it's real medical issues. I mean, PCOS goes undiagnosed for so long with some women because doctors don't take the pain seriously. And they're like, you're a woman and periods suck. Sorry you're having some cramping. Welcome to being a woman. And it's like, no, no, my insides are ripping themselves apart.
That's exactly where my mind went because working in primarily a female dominated field, I have also worked with a lot of women that have shared like just not being heard or not being validated for their experience in like the medical setting, especially when it comes to like physical pain. Mental health, I think, tends to have it can be like a scapegoat sometimes for the physical pain, just kind of like you said, like, is it just anxiety, is it just this? So I definitely think that shows up and maybe is not taken as serious at times, for
Mhm.
sure. And I would like to believe, kind of in the perfect world, that it is not intentional.
Right.
Like, I don't think, especially because we've talked about this being like a pattern and there being intention to it.
I don't think the intent is to manipulate. I just think the intent is to not be bothered, I guess, if that makes sense.
So it takes being able to really be selective of who we're seeing for a provider and feeling validated in that and build that good rapport. And I know that's much harder to do than it is said. For sure.
Yes. When I was pregnant with my son, oh my God, what, 9 years ago? The first OB that I saw, I felt that way. Like I was not hurt. It was my first pregnancy. I had questions, I had concerns, and I felt that like my concerns were not being heard. We found out while he was in my stomach that he had some issues, and I feel like my doctor really like blew me off and was just kind of like, "Ugh, I don't have time for this." And I switched because again, first baby, I thought that was normal. I'm like, "Okay, maybe they're busy. I'm just being annoying." And then a friend of mine was like, "That's not normal. You should switch doctors." I didn't even know you could switch in the middle of a pregnancy. I
Right.
didn't know anything, but I did, and the difference was like night and day. It was incredible. And I was right. Like, I found out that the first doctor missed a lot of crucial things that the second doctor saw on my records. So,
And so this is not just trying to throw shade at medical providers or anything like that. Everybody is busy, but being able to advocate and being able to know what feels right
mhm,
for us.
yeah, and just advocating for yourself. And yep.
Hmm. So medical gaslighting, that I mean, this is again, gaslighting in general is a term that's thrown around. It's like a buzzword now.
Yeah.
So really knowing where it is appropriate to use, and if that's the actual term or not the actual term, I'm sure it can have similar impact of just not feeling validated and feeling as though
Hmm.
being passed over.
Relationships, rental, medical. Can you think of any others?
The last one that I can kind of think of is employment. And this is one that can be really thought out. It can be maybe not as much of a direct intention on one individual person, but more of like a broad intention if there is a different agenda to be financially like pinching pennies or different. Being able to think about the way it might show up is if we're being told to do something and then having like a specific reward, or being overworked and feeling that burnout and just being told that that's normal.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. So I was thinking of like working through your lunch, like
Mhm.
and being kind of being told like that's like, don't you care about your job?
Yeah.
Like you said during your interview that you were a hard worker and that, you would sacrifice for the job. And is that really what you're doing by taking a full hour lunch?
So with that is it may not be directed as much of like one single person being targeted by this. It might be that entire like workforce or like that group of people that is feeling the pressure to meet expectations or quotas or work in a certain way that is just not realistic or sustainable, and then feeling less than or feeling as though we're not holding up our end because we can't meet these unrealistic expectations, but being told other people are, or being told that, well, if you were really hardworking, you'd be able to do this.
Huh. Yeah.
Can you think of any other ways that it might show up?
Employment wise?
Yeah.
I don't know. If I'm wrong, you can just cut this out. But I think of like the taboo around discussing salaries and how they're not allowed to tell you that you can't discuss your salary, but they find ways to make you think that it is rude to talk about your salary.
Yeah.
But what does that do? That manipulates you to not talk about your salary, and that leads to unfair pay scales.
Intimidation is a really broad term, but intimidation of security or intimidation of just in general, like intimidation of this is a tactic of manipulation and is something that is utilized in gaslighting to gain or maintain power. Really driving it home with the employment piece is a separation in power, feeling less than or having an unequal sense of power or control in the workplace, and one side really holding that.
Yes.
What are some common phrases that might be utilized in gaslighting just in general?
Ooh, you're remembering that wrong. Like you said, the extreme. So you always do this.
Mhm.
Mm, like every time we go out, you always say that I'm flirting with somebody. Well, probably because you are, but but making it seem like, there's definites of like the always, never. If you're heated about something and they say, You need to calm down.
You always overreact.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
It can also be, maybe this isn't like a specific phrase, but it might be blaming the victim of this, of, well, you made me do this. If you didn't do this, I wouldn't have had to react that way. Or you caused this to happen. Don't you remember you did this and this that made me react this way? So deflecting ownership of that behavior and placing it on the victim to, they somehow deserved it or they caused that to happen.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I feel so icky even just talking about it. Like,
No.
you know what I mean? I'm just like,
Another part that is maybe not specifically a phrase, but is utilizing like language, is they will turn people against you. So turn people against the victim. They might tell stories by using, fluffy, really positive language and almost identify themselves as the victim. And that could be with family, with friends, with different supports that you guys have, to then convince that support system that the victim is the one that is actually either the perpetrator or abusing in some sense. And then that also affects your credibility. So, and they build that. So then when, or if there is a point in time that you finally do share what is going on, or you have a question about it, they've already padded that story to the people around you. So you don't have a leg to stand on, and then you lack support there too. That's even more isolating in this situation.
yes. And isolation is a key, right? Like if you're gonna manipulate someone, you isolate them so they have nobody to fall back on and be like, wait, did I imagine that? You were there.
And this can even go as far as like moving or changing like physical things. This could be
The gaslights.
gaslights itself. Some more modern ways that this might happen is by moving items, or we live in a world of technology, erasing things or deleting things, or even going as far as manipulating phone calls or text messages to really make you question yourself. So we live in a world of technology that there's a lot to be able to mess with, and it can just bring us farther away from being able to trust ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Changing the passcode on the phone and then being like, it's the same as it always was. God,
Forgot.
you always forget things. Well, I'm not going to tell you. You need to remember. We really need to work on your memory. This will be good practice when you remember what it is.
That almost felt triggering. But yeah, I mean, so it comes in really, really nice language many times. Very,
It comes across as like helpful.
yeah.
Listen, your memory is really struggling, so I'm not going to just tell you. Like I'm going to help you remember because we want to improve that. Like I care about you.
I'm concerned about you.
Oh my
Something you should
gosh.
be
I'm
able to
concerned about
do.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So commonly that gets thrown in there. When we hear that, we want to think it's coming from a place of care and compassion.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost weaponizing helpful or supportive terms. So it's definitely, this is not an exhausted list. This is something that you can kind of take anything that is helpful and change the context of it, and it can be manipulative. Something that, going on the manipulation piece of, back to, not all manipulation is gaslighting, but gaslighting is manipulation. Children will manipulate to try and get their needs met, to try and get what they would like. That is not as thought out. It is not as much of a pattern, and it is for their personal gain because they want something.
Dude, kids are master manipulators, but they are not gaslighters. I hope we're not raising little gaslighters. Okay, so you've listened to our podcast. You have identified that you are in fact in some type of relationship or whatever that there's gaslighting and you're a victim of gaslighting. What do you do? How do you get out?
Recognizing it, identifying it, learning the terms, learning the things to be able to look out for. And then my head instantly goes to having a journal, documenting this.
Ooh, so sucks that you even have to do that.
It'll build our confidence though.
Yes, for sure.
Again, being, I guess, mindful in that sense that maybe we can't just have a notebook that says a log of gaslit things. Maybe we have to do it a little bit more secretively. Maybe we do it on our phone or
Things I love about my partner. On this day, he helped me with my memory.
a way that I have recommended for people at times in like difficult relationships is sending an email to a trusted person and then deleting that email. So kind of creates a
Ooh.
log. Can do a text message, but many times an email is like easier to print for if you are able to build that confidence in yourself.
Yep. Um, Specifically with relationships, I'm gonna sound like a jerk, but people can change, but they usually don't. So if you have identified that you are in a very manipulative relationship, if you can, just leave. Like, you're not going to fix them. You're not going to change them. You're not going to make them suddenly into a great person who doesn't manipulate you. That's my personal opinion, is there's no coming back from that.
And where it can be really tricky is because we might call them out on this and they might change for a period of time. That's where that love bombing comes back in. And then they do give up some of that control and can say all of those right things. But without having real consequences, they are not going to change. Without having the actual desire to change that behavior, they're not going to change. And if it's just because we want them to, we're never going to change that person.
And for me, it's like, even if they act changed, I still would never be able to trust them again. Who wants to be in a relationship that you can't trust them? So that's my opinion, is get out. Get the hell out. Like, no.
And it can go in phases where it can be really, really bad, and then it can be a period of time that it's really, really good, and that can almost make us think that, "Oh, it's not that bad." Again, we start to question ourselves, especially after the fight or the argument.
I experienced this with someone that I know, and the argument was, well, all relationships have their ups and downs, right? All relationships have their ups and downs. Okay, is it up and down, or is it cycle? So, ups and downs is like, good and bad days. Sometimes we disagree. But cycling is the cycle of abuse.
Mhm.
And that's with the love bombing and then the abuse.
And so having that many times the tension building phase before the blow up, before the big thing is what takes the longest. And that's so uncomfortable. Then there's the event or the abuse that happens, and it can be emotional, physical. And then you have that period of time that's the honeymoon phase. Something that you can notice in that is each time that honeymoon phase gets shorter and shorter. Maybe it was things were good for 3 months after something happened.
Ooh, that's such a good point.
Yeah, we're like, "Okay, yeah, something really changed." And again, being said, we make mistakes. We cannot expect to be perfect. Notice that cycle or that pattern. If it is something we're really trying to be conscious about and trying to stay in that relationship, notice how quick that cycle restarts.
And this is just for all relationships, not specific to gaslighting, but like, if you're having the ups and downs, pay attention to the downs, because that's when you really get to know a person. And, on mine and my husband's worst day, I would still choose him
Mhm.
no matter what. But if your downs are like knock down, drag out, get the hell out of my house, like blah, 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 like, that's not normal and it's not healthy. That's not a healthy up and down of a relationship.
When we're experiencing the lows, is it the same thing over and over and
Ooh,
over? Or in a healthy relationship, we're resolving one thing and then being able to move on to another challenge. When it's an unhealthy cycle, we're repeating that exact same or slightly different challenge over and over and over.
that is such a good point. That is okay. I'm going to use that now. That's the difference between ups and downs and cycles, is the downs should be different things you're disagreeing on. My gosh, that was like a light bulb moment for me. Okay. All right. So in regards to gaslighting,
Mm.
do you have anything else to add? It sucks.
It sucks. It's also sucks once we identify it. And that's where sometimes we stay so stuck in those situations because it sucks to identify it. But that work and that progress that we can put into it eventually does have a benefit, even though it does not feel like it in the moment. And when it does, we will feel the benefit of the change that we made. But it's not a simple or easy process to work through this.
And I would really suggest getting some help, speaking with a therapist, to build that trust in yourself back up, build that self-confidence back up. That is incredibly hard to do by yourself after leaving a relationship with someone, whether it be a parent, significant other, whatever. After leaving that, it's hard. Utilize your resources and talk to somebody about it.
One last quick thing with that is many times that abuser or the gaslighter is going to discourage us from getting help or seeking
Ugh.
support or resources because it might shed light on what they're doing. So
Mm-hmm.
that might be a red flag or a warning sign with that something is going on. If back to the isolation piece, they don't want that to get out. They don't want you to have other opinions.
Yep,
So,
exactly. Oof. Good discussion.
right. Thank you guys so much for joining this week. If we have any experiences or any other tactics to work through this, please share it with us.
Yes, for sure. Share your experiences and help others as well.
We can grow together.
Yay. All right. Bye, everybody.